Благодарам, hvala, dobro jutro. Nobody awake? It is a great pleasure to be back in Belgrade participating in the official launch of the Samit100. I love this city, the atmosphere, and of course, because it's not too far away from where I grew up in Skopje, Macedonia. And I also love the concept, the whole concept of business, getting together, thinking of what can be done, working collaboratively, also suggestions for government. So the whole concept of the Samit100, a new deal for a new age, is something that's very close to my heart, and I really wish you well and wish you the perseverance for you to drive this in the future. My topic today, what Maya asked me to do, and she's a very good taskmaster, but she asked to talk about leadership. And then I said, well, can you give a little bit more details? I don't want to waste my time, and even worse, I hate to be wasting your time talking about things that may not be appropriate or that may not be useful. So she asked, make sure that don't overdo my time and allow time for Q&As. But she thought it'd be very useful if I cover 5 topics. And those 5 were, I normally don't use notes, but that would be useful to use notes so I don't go on for 5 hours. But the first was to provide some background on my, quote-unquote, my life story. Second, philosophy and leadership, and discuss some of my successes, but also some of the lessons learned from my career. 3, to provide some views on the current economic environment, and if I have any views on when the environment may actually change for the better. 4th, and again, very close to my heart, particularly the last 10 years, any personal views on what's required to be successful in a developing economy, both to drive growth, but also to drive improved competitiveness of local companies. And last, to take the liberty to make some recommendations to this group. So the approach I'll take is I'll try to cover all 5 of them and allow 20 or so minutes for Q&A at the end. And although I'm very tempted to go back to Skopje as early as possible today, Maya had asked me to stay for the lunch, for the breakout sessions, and for dinner tonight. So if there's any questions that you'd like to follow up during the breaks or dinner, I'll be around till 6 o'clock tomorrow morning when I'll be driving over to Skopje. Dobro? Does this sound like a plan? Yeah, all right, very good. Life story, and again, abbreviated. I was born in 1953 in Skopje, the old Yugoslavia. And I lived through a very significant flood in 1961, big earthquake in 1963, and she lost some really close friends and 4 family members, aunts and uncles. We lived in a 2-room, not 2-bedroom, but 2-room house. One was kitchen. The other was the room where my parents, my sister, and I slept. Outside toilet, not much money, not many material goods. When people ask me, how was your childhood? I always use one word. I just say, terrific. And it's not a joke. I had very supportive parents, great friends, very demanding schools. I think we had great teachers. And at least at that time, Yugoslavia was doing so well relative to competition, quote-unquote competition. The other Warsaw Pact countries. Not other, but versus the Warsaw Pact countries. So as a kid, there was a good morale. There's a good momentum in the country. My personal goals, frankly, are 2. 1, to be a professional soccer player. I was hoping to be the next Čakularac or Osim. Osim was actually my height. Or to be a politician. I think all kids at that time were aspired to be politicians or athletes. So life was good. I was a good student, good athlete, and I was really happy in the environment. Then the world turned upside down in 1969. My father had gone to visit his sister in the United States in 1966. For the next 3 years, that's all he talked about. We should move to the United States. We just didn't think it was going to happen. Then all of a sudden, the paperwork came, and we left in March 1969. I was 15 and a half, very unhappy to be leaving the place I loved. And we moved to the United States on a Thursday, and speaking this much English, no friends, very impaired confidence, went to a regular high school, to gymnasia, on Monday. So talking about shell shock. And my parents actually were age 56. My mom couldn't have kids for many for a long time. So she was 56, my dad was 57. Again, to move to a completely new country, not speaking a word of English. They both worked in factories in the Cleveland area. And I still remember they bought a home, which was a 15-year mortgage, and they hated debt. They just did not want to have the obligation to owe money to somebody else, and they paid it off in 4 years. They worked 12, 16 hours a day. They're so determined to have my sister and I to be successful and not to be liable to a bank. And sometimes I think that a little lesson would be well served for many companies and many governments today to live within your means. But it's also fortunate. There's a very welcoming community in the U.S., Serbs, Slovenians, Croats, Macedonians in the Cleveland area. I picked up a new sport, swimming. My high school did not have a soccer team. And although I was still very homesick, I was starting to become acclimated in the community. I went to college on a swimming scholarship. I was a math major, took a number of business classes. I was fortunate enough to be selected to be the captain of both the soccer and the swim teams at the university. And I actually had a chance to swim for Yugoslavia in 1972, the Munich Olympics. Decided not to do it. Mistake, I still regret it. But the view was, I'm not a great enough swimmer relative to other American swimmers, so I thought it would be a fraud to actually go swim, get a major mistake. In 1975, when I graduated from university, I was recruited to play professional soccer. That's when Pele and Beckenbauer were playing in the U.S. I made a decision. I wasn't good enough or fast enough to make a living in soccer, and I went into business in 1975. So more than 35 years ago, I'm a long student of leadership in politics, military, history, sports, but most important, in business. And here I'll give you a commercial, and this lots of times does not appeal to many European audiences, but I think business is a very noble profession. And I think to be a great manager, a great employee in a great company is an absolute gift to society. If I say this in France or Spain and many other countries, somehow there's the idealism of politics and what you can do for society and many other things, and somehow business is put at the bottom. And I just come from the opposite side. A great business with ethics and what you can do for young people to provide opportunities for the future, what you can do for society is second to none. So I'm a very strong supporter of strong societies, high quality of living, but I do think that business is at the heart of what makes great societies. I never apologize for it. Like everything else, business is not perfect. There's many things we do not do well. But as a business leader, if you can motivate your employees, if you have a strong vision, that's frankly as wonderful a job as you can have. But before discussing my career, again, with General Electric, 25 years, 5 years at Motorola, 4 years at Nortel, I've been a Boeing director for 7 years. I've had a chance to meet some of the greatest business leaders of our generation, and I look forward to providing some background. But before that, you cannot give your life story without making at least a couple of comments about your family. My parents unfortunately passed away, my mom back in 1978, and my father in 1991. And when people ask you, Mike, don't you wish your parents were still alive to see your successes? And I says, well, of course I do. I love my parents. But my first job at age 21, when I went to work at General Electric with a tie on, college graduate, my parents thought I won the jackpot, the lottery, so they certainly thought I was very successful at age 21. So I think of them very fondly, but not, boy, I wish they were here to see how successful I am. I'm married to Robin, 28 years. She had a great career at General Electric, decided to stay home. We have 3 boys. Oldest one is age 26, VP International for Groupon, which is one of the fastest growing companies in the world today. And he works out of Korea, Seoul, Korea. My second son, Kirk, is 24, works in sports marketing. Our youngest boy, he's 2 meters and 9 centimeters, is a 20-year-old at Duke University. He actually plays basketball for Coach K, Coach Zafirovski, who's also the coach for the U.S. national team. So that is my background. It took 8 minutes to give you a background on my business story, my life story. Second, my views on leadership and some of my successes and also lessons learned. First of all, I do think it's very important for corporations to have values. that they're proud of and in which they communicate broadly to their employees, customers, and suppliers. But I think it's just as important to have your own leadership values and that you be proud to explain to your employees, to your customers. And I have those, and they actually go back 25 years. It's October 1st, 1986. Obviously, you can figure out how old I am today. But it was my first president and CEO positions. I'm age 32, and totally unexpected, Mr. Welch asks me to run this small company. So I have a week to prepare. Said, well, I'm going to tell 400 employees that I'm their new president and CEO. I've never done anything operationally before. There was a company in Seattle, so I thought it's very important to explain to them how I will approach the task and what the expectations I will have from those employees. And this is on one page, and every time I have a new job, I always bring the same page. Obviously, you adapt it to the current business challenge. But those guiding principles, nothing revolutionary, but the importance, like most things in life, is how determined and how do you actually apply your behavior to what you say you're going to do. First one, delight customers. Again, this is back to 1986. I spent at least half my time with customers. And not only superficial, let's have coffee or a glass of beer, but what does your business do and how can I help you be as successful as possible? And again, if you're employees of our company, if I don't spend half my time with customers, you know I'm a fraud or a fake. If I do, then you know it's important to me, and if I bring a message from the customers, there's going to be an expectation that we're going to deliver. Second, and equally important, to have the most motivating work environment, where people really believe they can fulfill their career ambitions. Money is important, but I would say secondary to being respected, and where results and values are being appreciated. Third, again, very important in business, superior results. The comments I would make, I'm a firm believer, if you do a great job in 1 and 2, 3 should be the natural outcome. 1 + 2 = 3. So delight customers, motivate your employees, make sure that there's a good chance to move up, and significant results. 4, to give back to communities. If you're a successful business, you can afford to give money to local colleges, local schools, people that are not as fortunate as you may be. And I think that really inspires kids that want to come to work for your company if you have some social mission above and beyond making profits, which again is very important, but it's much more than that. Next one, I was always very honest to say, look, we work way too many hours to be in business, to do anything else but to compete really hard and to try to win. We're not going to win every game, every customer, and this may be an uncomfortable place for you, but where I am, I'll give everything I have and expect the same in return. And last one, and again, this one goes back to the company values, that if your corporation has certain stated values, it is very important for you as the CEO of the business to be a role model for those values. Again, if you're not, everyone's going to know you're fake. You're emperor without clothes. And I'll give you quick examples of General Electric. If you read some of the books, there's the 4 E's. Energy. You have the personal energy to take upon the big task. Energize others. Excite your employees, customers, suppliers. Edge. Are you disciplined enough and tough enough to make the decision when you have to make a decision? Or do you forever defer making those decisions? And very important, execute. Do you do what you say? Do you meet your commitments? So I'll give you a couple of war stories, if you will, on GE to see how those were applied. And as a young manager at that time, if you believe in those, it's very difficult for Welch or whomever you're working for to say no if you exhibit those values, and also you come up with aggressive plans. And as you know, Welch always pushed, be number 1 or number 2, globalize your businesses, and grow in services, not only products, but provide end-to-end solutions. So I always challenged my team to think the same way, and I made more than 80 acquisitions when I was with GE to fulfill the strategy. And let me give you one specific example, I think, to bring it to life. In 1992, when I was running a business in the US providing management services, fleet leasing, fleet management to corporations, I wanted to expand into Europe. I wanted to acquire Avis Leasing. And I thought, it would make us number one in the world, we'll expand into services, and it'll help us globalize. So I thought this would be very easy for my boss, Gary Wendt, the CEO of GE Capital, to say yes to. He said no 5 times. Over a 14-month period, I kept going back, and they kept coming up with reasons not to go for the approval of this acquisition. Finally, they gave up to say, well, we're not fully supportive, but if you want to take your career at risk, if you don't see the big guy, if you don't see Jack Welch, go ahead. So the night before the board meeting, Paolo Fresco, he used to be a vice chairman of GE, Italian guy, just wonderful person, a mentor of mine. Eventually, he became the CEO of Fiat after he retired from GE. So we have a dinner, 7, 8 of us. He says, Mike, you know Europe is a dirty word right now within GE. We made 3 LBO, leveraged buyout transactions in Europe. We lost all our money in all 3 of them. So we owe for 3. We bought this blanking blank company in Hungary, Tungsram. We're losing $100 million a year. We bought this medical business in France. We're losing $100 million a year. Europe is in recession. We have all these crazy unions and work rules in Europe. And Jack is going to tell you this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. He likes you, but there's no way he's going to approve it. So we're at dinner, and everybody is looking to see what's going to be the reaction. I said, look, Paolo, I understand what you're saying, but this will help us be number one. We'll go in services, help us globalize. I've been doing this thing for 18 months. I know what this business is going to do, so I like to have the chance to talk with a big man in the morning. It took Welch 5 minutes to approve it. And the great thing was, this is one of the more successful acquisitions. I committed. I signed in blood what we were going to deliver. We doubled the size of the company from 125,000 vehicles to 250 in 3 years. Profits were doubled as well. Very little additional expenses because we had great systems. And as a result of this, we actually opened the doors for many other GE activities in Europe. And during the 1990s, GE went from $8 billion to $24 billion in revenues as a company in Europe. So this really opened the doors for a number of other very successful promotions. One I'm very proud of, then I was appointed to be the CEO for GE Lighting in Europe. I lived in London and Budapest. The Tungsram business was losing $100 million a year. Again, it was a very inspirational acquisition for GE to go into Eastern Europe. Very unsuccessful. 3 years we turned it around from losing $100 million to making $100 million. But as opposed to discussing the financials, what I'm most proud is that we took some of the smartest Hungarian managers, young kids between ages 25 and 30. Within the 3 years, we promoted 155 to other GE businesses in Hungary, in Europe, and back in the United States. With the whole view of if you use your IQ, and education in Europe continues to be very strong, but this is the environment where you can prosper. And we're looking for people, not looking for if you're going to make mistakes, but people that can excel. So they became, again, one of the great stories, frankly, I'm most proud about is ability to take people from, in this case, Hungary, and promote those to the rest of the business. They allowed me to become the CEO of GE Lighting globally, which is a business that Thomas Edison actually started back 100 years ago. And that was my last job at GE. My family was very unhappy. When I left GE in 2000, I went from there to Motorola. Again, a great innovator in processes like Six Sigma, also a great communications company. But when I arrived in June 2000, our market share in cell phones was down to 8%. Used to be 50 just 3 years before that. We were losing $1 billion a year. And when I started in June 1st, 2000, there was an article in Time magazine the week before, May 23rd, 2000, with headline news. It's going to take a moonshot for Motorola to make any kind of an impact on Nokia. And I always do weekly messages to employees, video or email. So my first email, I still have a hard copy of it to the employees, that said, look, I'm so delighted to be with Motorola. Great company, great history. We're in trouble right now, and nobody believes we can be successful again. And I used this quote. And an engineer, his name was Steve Larson, wrote back to me and says, Mike, welcome aboard. But what you may not realize, when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, When he spoke back on the earth, there was a Motorola communication device that was communicating back to the earth. So if there's any one company or employees that can create a moonshot, is Motorola. So every time I went and spoke with people, I had used that example of how you have to believe in the darkest days of what's possible. And in the next 3 years, we made a commitment to new product innovation. We hired a number of people from Apple on the design side. So we went from 8 points of market share to 24. We went from losing $1 billion a year to making $3 billion a year. But the story of values. And when I went to Motorola, we changed the 4 E's, only made one change. As opposed to having personal energy for the first value, we changed it to envision. We thought if you're a high-tech company, it's very important for you to be able to see the future, the vision. So if you're interested in what the story behind the Razor, which is a very famous phone, I was giving 2 speeches in, I think it was New Orleans, a telecommunications event. So as I'm running between meetings, Ralph Pinney, who is the chief technical officer, was chasing me and says, Mike, I've not been sleeping. I'm just thinking what's going to be the next moonshot for Motorola. So I think I know what I can do. He pulls out a phone. It's a typical phone. The width is 1 inch, 2.54 centimeters. If you give me 40 engineers for a year, I think we'll be able to make it narrower by actually from 2.45 centimeters down to 1. It'll take us a year. And all these new great designers you've hired from Apple, we'll be able to come up with a revolutionary phone. And here's where we're laying people off. I felt almost like Welch back 5 years ago to say, how can you say no? You're laying people off, you give a view to the organization that we're tough to be able to go through the recession at that point in time. But he was a passionate person. He's envisioning the future. So in many ways, he gave me the same passionate appeal, which I recall 5, 6 years ago making it as a young manager. We said yes, and I think the rest of it really demonstrated that there was a very, there was a smart decision. I'll give you an additional quick success story again, how you tie values and what you purportedly stand for and coming up with management decisions that are very consistent with those statements. This is Boeing. I'm a director now for 7 years. But back in the early 2000s, there's a discussion, should Boeing try to come up with a new replacement to a 747? Airbus had made a commitment, the 380, the big plane, for long distance. And the popular and safe decision would have been for Boeing to defend the 747 position. And you have to give credit to the engineers that says, no, what the world's looking for is a new plane. And that's where the 787 came up, the idea. Composite weighs 20% less, so it's fuel efficient. People hate the hub and spoke process. They say we can have a plane that's going to fly 8,000 miles, so you can go much longer distance, travel around the world without stopping. You can afford to have very significant space in the plane to allow it to have windows and much better circulation of the air. So there's a big bet made on 787. Mega success in terms of a customer perception and reception. It's late couple of years, which is obviously not what you want to have. But started flying last month in Japan. And this is the most well-received airplane in the history of the world. We have more than $120 billion of orders on books, completely sold out through 2018. And again, a company that says, forever new frontiers, which is the value statement for Boeing, how that really was made consistent with the actions and commitments from the employees. Last war story, if you will, and this one did not have a happy ending in many ways, is Nortel. I have many lessons learned in my life. I've tried always to apply those in new environments. And with respect to Nortel, I have never worked harder in my life. We put together a great team. We had great support from customers. And we applied all learnings from people we hired from, obviously, promotions from Nortel, but also IBM, McKinsey, Nortel, GE, and Juniper. The goal when I joined Nortel at end of 2005 was to truly recreate a great company. How to fix a broken icon. And I'll just give you a couple statistics of Nortel was in 2000, 6 years before I came, and in the fourth quarter of 2005. Really to show you that I was never afraid to take a big risk. In 2000, Nortel was $300 billion market cap company, one of the most valuable companies in the world. When I joined, it was down to $9 billion. So you have a 98% decline in market value. Employees from 100,000 down to 29,000, so 7% reduction. Top management was fired for cause. 7 people, they were fired for, the CEO included, were fired for fraudulent statements to investors and to the SEC. And there was a board member running the company for a year. Revenues have gone down from $30 billion down to $9 billion during those 6 years. We've been losing money every single year, both cash flow and money for 6 years. Our credit rating had gone from A to B minus. So very strong to junk bond. We had $4.5 billion in debt, the only high-tech company with more debt than cash. I know there's people here that work for Microsoft and HP, but again, we had $4.5 billion of debt and $1 billion of cash. We had $2.5 billion pension deficit, with 2 additional lawsuits from investors for $30 billion. Productivity was only 2-3% a year, so very low. Customer satisfaction was very poor. And most worrisome, we were losing market share to competition, particularly 2 Chinese players, ZTE and Huawei. So there was the environment, and we thought, just like at Motorola, we're going to point to the moon and try to get the organization excited. And frankly, 2006-07 and the first half of 2008 were outstanding. I mean, we grew the business from $9 to $11 billion. We were profitable at the operating level at 2006-07 and the first half of 2008. We're making big investments for Vodafone, Verizon told us we are the best 4th generation network, the so-called LTE, long-term evolution, the best optical products. Our productivity had gone from 3 to 16% a year. And although we're still lacking in size, I mean, there's a view in the industry, certainly was mine, that within a couple of years, we'd be able to start acquiring much bigger companies than we were. We thought with the operating platform to go from the smallest company to actually to be the one that's going to acquire many businesses. But then the world turned upside down. As you know what happened in 2008, revenues come down by 20 or 30%. If you're the smallest player without a balance sheet, our options were eliminated. So very painful, as opposed to being the company that acquires other businesses. We filed for protection, and we actually sold the businesses to other companies. Well-run, but small businesses. And I mean, that's in 3 minutes, that's a summary at Nortel. 2 big lessons. And one, you cannot afford to have, I mean, it's very risky to have high debt and high leverage for a company in a cyclical environment or in a high-tech business. And second lesson learned is that it takes much longer to turn around a company that's been in decline for a long period of time. I mean, Nortel was in decline for 6 years. If I'm looking at Motorola or some of the other turnarounds within GE, maybe it's within a 1 or 2 year decline. It's much faster to give people the confidence, you were here a couple of years ago, and this is what we can do to turn it around. So if you have a really tough situation, years or decades of decline, it's fixable. It's going to take much longer time to do that. So again, I can go on for a long time, but overall takeaway on leadership values and your commitment to them. If you apply those, you're giving yourself and your team the best chance of success. Is that going to work every time? Absolutely not. I mean, life doesn't work that way. Sports do not work that way. But if you do not behave that way, your chance of success is 0. If you apply it, it's going to work out most of the time, not all the time. But the importance for, if you have the passion, the desire to be the best you can, what do you learn from each situation and how do you apply those situations going forward? So again, hopefully this was useful on the lessons learned. Let me quickly move on to the third topic, my thoughts with respect to the current economic situation. This will be rather quick. I'm usually an optimist, but frankly, in this environment, there's not any good news any place in the world right now. And I'll come up with some comments at the end. I don't think we'll last much longer, but right now, Western Europe and US are not providing the kind of a leadership that is required from the developed world. There's too much debt and leverage, particularly at the government level, and there's a very poor political climate. It's much easier to attack as opposed to have solutions for going forward. I think that for businesses here, it's important to recognize that the last 3 or 4 years actually have been very good for corporations. Not great, don't get me wrong, but many companies have used this environment to really become much stronger. Whether that's better processes, better systems, taking cost out, saving cash for the future. And if you haven't done that, my suggestion is for you to do that. So there's the political environment, I mean, I'll just say, making commitments that governments cannot fulfill. And many of the best companies in the world have taken this environment the last 2 or 3 years to really become much stronger operationally, which positions them well for the future. Developing countries have seen most of the growth in the last 5, 6 years. I think that's going to continue. And what's required in this environment? Leadership, boldness, and practicality. Combination of all 3 of those by government, people, and businesses. I'm confident that better times are going to come, but it's going to be 2 or 3 years from now. I wish I could give you a better story. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully it's going to happen faster. But I think some painful adjustments, whether it's in Greece, whether it's the debt levels in the United States. But some correction is going to happen to give business the confidence to make investments for the future. Maya, on your 4th request, if you will, and this is actually very close to heart, is that a few personal thoughts of what's important for developing countries to do to stimulate growth and to provide the environment for companies to become more competitive on a global basis. And I'll just give you 3 comments and I'll drill down. One is that to ensure there's an attractive environment for foreign investment. Second, there's a commitment to improve the competitiveness of local companies and to promote entrepreneurship. And I'll come to the punchline here. You have to have both to be successful. I've done business all over the world. I've not seen a single successful developing country that's not been able to both attract business, investment in the country, and has been able to generate enthusiasm for strong local companies. So you really need both of those. And third, try to engage the diaspora, people like myself. And I hope there's a violent agreement in this room that the economy and economic development should be the forefront of thinking of all governments. Bill Clinton won 2 terms as US president. Obviously, he was very successful on many fronts. But there's always the reminder, it is the economy, stupid. So whenever he got confused and started thinking maybe broader themes, he knew unless he had the economy working, he may as well forget all those other activities. So if President Obama wants to get reelected, or I would argue any political leader in a democracy, unless they remember their very simple statement, they'll be for a big disappointment and unhappy people. Maybe the only exception is President Putin, but I'd say most democracies, unless you pay attention to the economy, that you'll not be a very popular leader. And that doesn't end there, but again, without it, your options are very limited. So in terms of attracting foreign investment, I heard a few of the comments from a previous panel. Now look, I'll try to make it summarize, but I've been personally invested decision, the General Electric particularly at Motorola, to make investments and open up factories in Turkey, in China, India, Hungary, Northern Ireland, Singapore, Israel, Egypt, South Africa, Germany, Poland, and also a very collaborative distributor operations in Serbia and Macedonia. So I know what I'm looking for is pretty consistent to what other CEOs would look at if they want to invest in Serbia, Slovenia, Croatia, or any other country. I mean, top of the list is the political stability in the country. They're going to speak with Tadic or with the presidents, again, from other countries. Can I believe that person? Does he get it? And if he gets replaced, with the next government, live up to the commitments that they've been made to me? Is there eager and productive workforce? And education does not equal eager and productive workforce. Is the infrastructure okay? Not only physical, but mobile communications, fixed line communications. Is the market opportunity significant enough on its own or to other markets? What is the experience from current investors? If I call them, and not only the people they're going to tell me to call, if there's 10 investors here, and you tell me call those 3 people, I would call the other 7, just to make sure that they're pleased with their investments. Are there competitive tax rates? Is there a commitment to the rule of law? Is there protection for IP? So it's a long and challenging list, but today's companies have choices where to invest, just like companies here do. And unless you're able to fulfill those requirements, then that companies will not come here. And I think that's very important, not the only thing, but it is important as a step of becoming a successful economy. Second, and equally important, commitment to competitiveness of local companies. And I said before, I have not seen a single successful country without having that balance. Here the government must pay the same level of attention to local businesses as they do to attracting foreign investment. But here's a big qualifier. I mean, personal views, and I had a wonderful discussion with President Tadić last night when I came from Chicago. The government plays a very important role, but should be mostly as an enabler. And my strong personal opinion and experience is that central planning does not work. Try to pick winners and losers does not work at the central level. Protecting local monopolies does not work. And also, the fatal flaw, high government spending typically does not work. If anything, that adds to the challenges of the economy, and also regulations. There's this insatiable appetite by politicians to look for quote unquote people that to either punish or to have all rules and laws that actually are a very significant burden to business creation. And the last comment, engaging diaspora. Let me give you a personal reason what prompted my involvement in that process. Is in 2002, I've been just promoted to become the new president of Motorola. There's a phone call in the office. My secretary chases me and says, the president of Macedonia is on the phone to you to congratulate you. And here I am, again, this is in 2003. I'm supposedly a proud former Yugoslav, proud Macedonian now. I always say that right when I introduce myself. I don't know who the president of Macedonia is. So it says, maybe I've been saying one thing and really not living up to that. Was President Boris Trajkovski became a good friend. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years later. He asked me to come, met with his cabinet a few times. It simply was an open discussion of my experiences and what can the government and businesses to be able to do in the country. A couple of years later, in 2006, 2007, a few of us started Macedonia 2025. It's a not-for-profit organization, not politically aligned, and again, our only goal is to, again, nothing is expected in return. We're not investing, we're not looking to make money, we're not trying to benefit from changing property laws, but simply the pride, if we can help where we grew up to become more successful in the region, if necessary, to become part of EU and NATO. And I mean, the goals are relatively simple, to try to help attract foreign investment. I mean, as an example, Dave Cody, the CEO of Honeywell, used to be a colleague at General Electric. We had organized for him to come and have dinner with Prime Minister Gruevski. Lots of those are long-term discussions. Whether Honeywell invest in Macedonia or not, we don't know. Kemet Electronics, before they made a decision, they asked to speak with me. The Macedonian team had done a great job. Victor Mizo is here. Victor is in the back, president. He's the CEO for Invest in Macedonia. And part of the reason for his job was actually when Prime Minister Gruevski asked me, Mike, when you've seen other countries, who does the best job of organizing their capabilities to market to foreign investors? I told him Turkey. I was very impressed with what Prime Minister Erdogan had done. And there was a person he hired as the direct report to him to coordinate all of the activities within Turkey to be able to make sales presentations, if you will. So now Victor has been very effective, tried to bring all the capabilities of Macedonia when they speak with companies like Johnson Control, Johnson Matthey. Also tried to provide some coaching to local businesses. Again, this is not a solution, but simply try to advance their thinking of what's possible. And also try to be thoughtful in making recommendations to the government to have the types of laws and regulations that respect the rule of law, but also minimize bureaucracy, and try to promote the type of education to be helpful for the economy for the years and decades to come. So really the question here is to say that if you have not been open to get engaged with the diaspora, there's many successful Serbians, Croats, Slovenians all over the world. I mean, it's a very free, very easy gesture on both sides to be able to organize it. Let me finish up with some recommendations in this environment for you. Is if I was running business today, and I'm not, so I'll try not to be too dramatic, but I would make a couple assumptions. First of all, I would assume that the turmoil will continue for at least a couple more years. In other words, I would not bet significantly on massive GDP growth. And I would remember the size of my markets are relatively small. And as important as they made to my company, to think where else should I be investing. And I looked at this, the GDP of the world, this is 2009 statistics, is $60 trillion. EU is 16 trillion, US is 16 trillion. But if you look at Serbia, Slovenia, Croatia, they're about between 45 and 60 billion. So you're less than 1% of the global economy, less than 1%. You put all three of you together, still 2.5% and 3%. But then look at Italy, $2.3 trillion. Romania, 160 trillion, Hungary, 124 trillion. Most successful small countries, Holland, Sweden, they obviously very efficient locally, but they do lots of their most prosperous growth by thinking, growing globally, starting with the countries right next to you. So if you're not thinking globalization, if you're not thinking how to expand your business, you're probably missing your biggest opportunity to grow. So the specific recommendations, as frustrated as you may be with the government and with lots of ills in the world, I mean, I would manage the things which you can control. And as a CEO, there's an enormous amount of activities you can control, balance sheet costs for starters. Second, I'll use this environment to really help my company be the best ever to prepare for the future. I think many of the best companies have already done that, but I really encourage you to do that. Think and grow experts would be the third specific recommendation. And I'll just give you a couple of small examples of companies which I helped start or encourage growing when I was with Motorola. One is in Vladicom, and this is a company in Serbia. And they used to be principally a Motorola distributor. Right now, they have 300 employees, 5 PhDs. Their revenues have gone to $80 million, and they think they can be $500 million business in 5 years. 5% of their revenues are in Serbia, 95% outside, mostly the Middle East and Africa. They've been able to use some of the former relationships that Serbia and Yugoslavia used to have. They bring end-to-end solutions with local engineers, and they're growing globally. And I thought it was a fantastic example of what's possible to be able to do from here. And in Macedonia, we started a small distribution company back in 2005. They'd be able to expand out to 50 employees. And only 15% of their business is in Macedonia. Most of it is in neighboring countries. So again, two small examples from personal experiences that what's possible to be able to help you keep what you have and grow it exponentially. And last one, invest in leadership, starting with your own. I mean, this is never too late, whether you're a 25 or a 50-year-old executive, to keep getting better, to be able to use your employees as the source of a growth and competitive advantage for many years to come. I love coming back in this region. I think what you're having as a goal for the conference are absolutely spot on. I think the opportunities here are very good. You have the cost structure, you have a central location, there's a population, there's a strong desire for strong relevance, and there's a work ethic that still, I think, is second to none. But that work ethic has to get stimulated, has to get inspired, and that, frankly, is the job of the CEOs. I applaud what you're doing. to be known as among the top 100 business leaders in this region is frankly a very good testament to what you've been able to accomplish at this point in time. And I wish you well in the years and decades ahead. So thank you for inviting me. I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Meni deluje, would you like to take a seat?
Sure.
Upstairs, yeah.
You can ask me in Serbian. I understand Serbian and Croatian and Slovenian, but I will answer in English.
Dakle, ostalo nam je nešto formalno oko 10 minuta, ali mislim da nakon nas sledi pauza, pa evo, probat ćemo da vidimo što više pitanja, što više odgovora da probamo da damo. A ja ću iskoristiti moju poziciju čisto za prvi put. Mislim da su dve stvari bitne prilikom ovog izlaganja sada. Mislim da to nas sve ovde interesuje kada je u pitanju liderstvo i kada je pitanje kompetenci. Prvi put kad smo se Mike i ja sreli, to je bilo 2007. u Vašingtonu i jedan čovjek koji je bio jako uticajan u svetu telekomunikacije je rekao, moraš da upoznaš jednog čoveka, jednog jedinog, i mislim, to je to, ne treba više ni sa kim da pričaš. I čudna stvar je bila da je taj čovjek bio Makedonac. I ja sam mislio, I thought he's just Macedonian. Tako da je moje razmišljenje bilo, Makedonac u redu, u stvari stanovim da je čovjek Grk. I sad Srbin je upoznat sa Makedoncem od strane Grka. Dakle, Grčka je jedno pitanje, bailout or bankruptcy. Drugo pitanje, pre 2 dana, odnosno preksinoć je preminuo Steve Jobs, mislim da je to najbolji primer upravo te dileme competency over the formal education and the status. So could you comment on that as well?
On the first comment, first of all, thank you for that comment, is that I lived in Belgium from 1989 to 1992, and the EU was created in 1992. So my comment dates now 20 years, was that to have an organization like EU to be successful, you either have to have more central decision-making. I wasn't advocating it, but to be successful, either central decision-making, or there has to be a consequence for countries that do not deliver to their promises. So again, this is not a comment on Greece, but I think with the European Union should think long and hard on members they have, and again, people do not live up to many promises and commitments to be part of a club. What do you do with them? And I for one think there should be very significant consequences, and not only for that country, but for the rest of the countries to fully appreciate the fact that not behaving and not delivering to the expectations of the organization will have dire consequences. So it's not a specific comment today, but I think the EU has to make a decision which way they'll be try to drive the very significant missions they have for the organization.
Steve Jobs?
Steve Jobs, among the top 2-3 most brilliant business people in the history of, at least in our lifetimes, very comparable to Thomas Edison and Jack Welch. But I should make a comment. There's interesting, can you emulate Steve Jobs? And earlier this week, I was at a CEO conference, and there's a very famous consultant from Bain & Company. He said there's probably 2 people that have done more to disrupt business than anybody else in a negative fashion, is Jack Welch and Steve Jobs. Everybody says, well, how is that possible? And his explanation was that Jack Welch made people believe you can make conglomerates successful. It's virtually impossible. Occasionally you may have a person like Jack that can make the impossible happen. Steve Jobs the same. Can you have someone that's going to deliver such great products without really spending much time talking with consumers? So Steve was uniquely qualified. He did a masterful job actually doing that. many other people that try to do the same thing, it's, frankly, they've done a very big disservice to their, to their companies and to their investors. But one of a kind, and I've met him a couple of times. I did not know him well, but obviously made a major, major positive impact on society.
Thank you. Dakle, evo pitanja za auditorijum. Izvolite. Imamo li?
And there's a gentleman in the back there.
Yeah.
You can ask me anything. I privately, as you can see, I'm pretty open. And will this be for public? Is this just for this room, I hope, or not?
Of course it's not.
Okay, okay.
Hopefully.
Okay, all right.
Looks like one has to be either brave or foolish to dare ask a question to such a luminary as Mike. His speech was very impressive and very inspiring indeed. Probably I'm on the latter rather than the former. But anyway, since Mike was kind enough to share a personal recollection, I'd like to start with one of mine, then express a wish and finish with a question. I'm Lou Breffort, the head of the World Bank office in Belgrade, and I've been here for almost 16 months now. The personal recollection is that before I became an international bureaucrat, I was in the private sector in Canada, and my first employer was a company on which each desk of this company had a motto engraved, and the motto was, "There are no problems, only solutions." And it was on each desk of people working in this company. And this has really stayed with me throughout my career. And then I'm even older than you are by 2 years, by the way. And the first lesson is empower your employees.
Absolutely.
In this company, you were not there to analyze problem and come to your CEO with problems. You were paid to find the solution and propose the solutions. And it's amazing throughout my career how much I found that, that there is brain power in every company that is just waiting to be unleashed. And the job of a good manager is to empower people, provide the direction, sure, make them accountable, but let them use their brain. And I think this motto maybe was a simple way to bring to the culture of this particular company this empowerment of employee thing. So I wanted to share that with you. The second is really a wish. When I heard you, I only wish that there were more formal bridges between the private and the public sector in terms of using the talent of the private sector to improve and reform and increase the productivity and change the attitude in the public sector. I would argue that part of the public debt issue that we're seeing right now is a failure of productivity in the public sector. And when I see that a successful businessman is able to take a company that is really in trouble and turn it around, and I'm absolutely convinced that it's not just about finance, it's about leadership, and it's about changing the culture, changing the attitude, and changing the mentality. I only wish that we could use, or the public sector or the politicians could find a way to use this talent and bring a successful CEO to the customs office for 3 years and turn it around. I don't want to single out customs, but this is just an example. Yeah. And maybe this is something that business leaders and political leaders should start talking about and try to find solutions. The last point is more a question. I was looking at some statistics recently about how many employees in Serbia, since I'm working in Serbia, I don't know about the other countries, Slovenia and Croatia and others. But in Serbia, I was absolutely astounded that only 3% of the people in the labor force, those that are employed, only 3% of them receive training throughout their career. And only, by the way, only 5% of the unemployed are receiving training. How can you remain competitive in a world that is changing fast and in a world that for competition and productivity improvement increasingly relies not just on geographical position or good infrastructure, but also on knowledge? How can you remain competitive in the future if you do not invest in retooling, reskilling, upgrading the skills of your labor force? And this is an agenda where I think the private and the public sector really need to work together. This cannot be done. Adult education cannot only be done by public. There needs to be PPP in adult education, and maybe your ideas, Mike, would be well.
Thank you. I mean, let me just make quick comments on all 3 points you made. First, I cannot agree more with you on empowering your employees and for that to be a very significant part of the culture and the competitive position of your business. Second, again, violent agreements, private bridges between business and government. And frankly, I do think that the smart people, the smart politicians, will fully realize that that's the only option that they have toward prosperity. So when I look at President Tadic, when the discussions last night, when I speak with Prime Minister Gruevski, I mean, I'm very open in my views to them. And I think not only understand that, but they are making steps to move in that direction. Percentage of government spending is way too high globally, and very specifically in developing countries. So they have to be addressed very aggressively. And I do think that people finally have a good appreciation for that. And with the last one, this is not necessarily an disagreement, but there's very important studies they have done to say, what does it take to train your employees? And if you can just remember 3 numbers, 70, 20, and 10, 70% is based on the jobs that the employees have. So if you have a dead-end job, you can do all the training in the world. Lots of bureaucratic jobs, they have zero chance of producing something useful from that individual. So in terms of jobs, they are very meaningful, and rotate your best employees, whether in public or private companies. It is the best driver to create skills. 20% is informal, managing from a mentor or a manager, and only between 5 and 10% is formal training. So you can some food for thought on that.
Imamo vremena još za kratki par pitanja. Izvolite. I molim vas da pitanja budu kratka, tako da bi mogli što više da odgovorimo. Hvala.
My name is Jelena Kralj. Since you covered so beautifully all the layers of this story, you left me with no questions, but still three points just for the end. Can you share with us just a little bit of your experience, what successful companies you worked for did in focusing on finding talent? Because we know that, despite all the global and macroeconomic factors that we are facing, one of the challenges that, for example, McKinsey stated several years ago that CEOs will be facing this next period is more than anything else finding and retaining talent. Second one is you talk to us as adult people and developed people in business, but if you were to empower young people today, which is the start of our workforce, what would you say to them today? And the last one, maybe for closure, since you started with your personal angle, I would like to ask you, what is the way you motivate and empower yourself today? I mean, speaking about all the situations that we are facing and your vast experience, how do you motivate yourself today for the future activities? Thank you.
Mike, let's pick up all 3 and then maybe you can answer, so that we just quickly pick up the rest of the 2 questions. Okay. Mislim da je gospođa Filipović imala pitanje. Ako vam je to...
My name is Dragica Filipović. I'm CEO of a broadband cable provider internet company in Serbia. You are obviously a market economy believer. I am as well. Having in mind that there are a lot of big changes in the world economy today, and uncertainty, and movements which are questioning market economy, having in mind that we are in the region which was until recently command economy in a way, and there are still a lot of supporters of a strong arm, centralized governmental management and so on, and the democracy which has not completely stabilized in all parts of this society. What kind of vision and encouragement can you give to the market economy believers? Are we going to stay, or are we going to become some kind of world of more socially orientated economies? Thanks.
Gospodin u belom, čini mi se.
Great questions, yeah.
My name is Anton Papesh. I'm working in the region quite several years. Actually, I did successfully several million projects in restructuring and production. And I'm very pleased to see, because I just worked last year with Mr. Mizo, and we successfully make a project in Macedonia, several million again investment. So I'm very pleased to hear from where this know-how is coming. And because I'm working in the old countries of ex-Yugoslavia, I can say out of the practice that at the moment, the best service for foreign investment is at the moment in Macedonia. So my question, because we are here for this purpose, is can you tell us a little bit more how you come so close to government of Macedonia and make such a great deal for foreign investors?
Okay. Shall we get an answers, and then we'll pick up the next round?
Yeah. There's one more question, I think. Was there one more?
There are two. Let's answer these, and then we can pick up the rest of the...
And again, I'm here through tomorrow morning, so go ahead.
Just a short one. Nenad Vucinic from VIP Mobile. You gave us several examples of how you built up the business by also restructuring companies. But I would like to hear from you something in specific about how you built the organization in qualitative terms, which helped you to achieve these targets. So, thank you.
Wow.
Can you share your experience with unions in your European operations?
Unions? Yes. Wow. Now, Maya, you've been pretty good being a good taskmaster. I mean, how much time do we have? No, I'm serious. This is
10 more minutes, yeah.
Good. I mean, this is a, yeah. I mean, those are great questions, and I'm probably going to wander back and forth, but and if I don't cover them all, by all means, raise your hand. I'll clarify. I mean, great questions, and obviously, pretty good meaning behind most of them. Let me just try to package some ideas. One, I mean, leadership is such a gift to individuals, and I think leadership, you're not born with it, but you develop it. And I mean, I'll just start with the people in this room. Most of your CEOs, sometimes people would say, isn't it so lonely to be in a corner office? I just said, just on the contrary. If you're a person in the corner office, I mean, you control your life much more than anybody else. And you can pick and choose where and how you invest your time. And where I'm going with that, I want us to say, is that there's such a insatiable search for leadership elsewhere. And the first comment I would just say is that, can you be the manager, the leader you want your boss to be, or whoever your idol is? So there's many big challenges facing the world. So one is that, especially in this very important forum, I would just ask you to go back and look in the mirror yourself and ask yourself, again, are you as good as you want other people to be? And if not, what's stopping you? And if you can get that process going, so every time I have a chance to drive that message, including people I train and mentor, even today, I have 40 people I mentor, anywhere from 17-year-olds to 70-year-olds. Some are CEOs of Fortune 50 companies, other kids in college. So in terms of I love the whole concept of leadership. And if I can help others the way people have helped me, I do that all the time. And again, I urge for you to consider doing the same thing with others around you. Developing people. I think if you're a manager, if you lose a top talent, that's almost as bad if you're stealing money. Mr. Welch really brought that point home, is that people stealing money from your company are harming the business, and you losing your top talent is the equivalent to an ethical violation. So the whole concept of coming in, putting top people in, or do annual evaluation, the view was that, how do I treat this wonderful asset? Am I getting the person better, hungrier? Is the company, am I benefiting also from their talents? And there's lots of discussions with General Electric, always focusing on they would say the draconian dealing with the non-performers. And I think what most people really missed the point is that before Welch came aboard, I mean, it's almost like it's spreading the butter. Everybody was getting the same level of a recognition, same level of rewards. So the reason Jack was driving differentiation to say, I like to know whom the Slobodan think are his best people. Then I'll listen to him for 5 hours today, once a year. Tell me who your people are. Then a year from now, the same intense process. Tell me what happened to your employees. You had Maya, you had Zorica, you had Ivan, and you had Nikola. You told me your stars last year. Are they still with the company? Did they get promoted? Jack, I'm sorry I lost 2 of them. Why? Well, they were not any good. I says, what do you mean? Is this a convenient excuse? You lost somebody. And if you start with that thinking, that the people are your best asset, and again, maybe it's not popular in a country that comes from socialist and communist backgrounds, not all people are the same. You take a better care of your best, and not because you're discriminating against others, because to move the company forward, you do need to have good performers to perform above average performers to perform excellent, and excellent performers to perform at unimaginable levels. So your job as a manager is to be able to do that. If that's how you come to the office every morning, that's going to force you to think differently and to promote and to reward and to tell people, yeah, I discriminate for the good people. And I don't think this person is good unless he or she demonstrates their values. How do I motivate myself? To be honest with you, I don't know. Always a glass 3/4 full, not half full. One of the best appraisals that Jack Welch put on my resume was forcefully optimistic. I said, gee, I said, what does that mean? I said, well, to see the future, but not naively hoping it's going to happen. But how do you drive your behavior, people around it, to make most of that positive future happen? It doesn't happen all the time. Unions, I mean, both my parents were factory workers. When I was going to college, I worked in a factory, so I have lots of appreciation why unions came along. But there's lots of horrible practices going within unions. And I can just give you an example. When I went to Hungary in 1996, so we're losing money. Jack is very unhappy with the Tungsram business. So I come there and says, Mr. Zafirovski, we're going to have labor negotiations starting next week. I said, gee, I thought labor in the country doesn't expire until January 1st of next year. Oh, no, but it takes us 6 months to negotiate with the unions. And all of a sudden, all kinds of smoke signals go out, and there's management versus union going on. And those annual contracts. I said, this is the most absurd thing I've heard in my life. We're losing money. Jack is thinking about closing all the freaking factories in Budapest. And I'm going to go discuss with bureaucrats now 6 months of what kind of raises we're going to give them. So and they says, we're going to keep you in the reserve. CEOs cannot be seen speak with the unions. There's 3 or 4 layers. I said, it's crazy. So we met with them. I said 2 things. One is that, I love Hungary. You have a great history. We don't make this thing successful, but we know on certain terms, if it continues as is, we're going to close the goddamn place. Number two, you're not competition. For me to be successful, I need to have 18,000 employees. They're so turned down to beat Philips and Siemens. Otherwise, we'll be on the top of a sinking empire. So I love to compete with you. I challenge them on a soccer match. Once a year, we can play management against the unions. We can compete there. But I tell you what, I need a 5-year contract. I need for you to work with me to make this, and I don't want you to go to be trashing management to get all the employees excited so you can look like a hero to them. And if they say, how can I make it more helpful to you? And they threw all kinds of negatives against General Electric. There used to be an annual Olympics. They had 7 factories in Hungary. They used to have a day of Olympics in Budapest. And I guess for money saving, they was canceled 3 years ago. So no, I put it back in. I like employee enthusiasm. We give them nice raises. So we expect quality, we expect productivity, and we expect none of this playing. Now I can just tell you, in many parts, particularly in the U.S., the unions are not playing a very productive role. There's a management, there's versus the unions, and so anyway, maybe I've wandered off too much, but unions have gone from protecting employees to becoming so bureaucratic in the process. They're now looking to improve the employees' skills, and they're now looking to become much more, to become very part of the solution of management. Boeing has the same situation. I mean, this is every 2-3 years we have a big strike. So it's almost like management is the problem, and unless we strike, we're not going to demonstrate our power. So I'm very big on transparent communications, high bars to make sure that you can try to have the unions to be successful, but always needs to go back to what are the solutions that we're trying to drive within the business.
Market believers were, I think.
Yeah, in terms of discussing with the businesses, I mean, let's see, sorry. Can you...
Yeah, I mean, the question was market economy. I mean, what can we do in terms of the region being post-command economy?
I'll give you another example. I mean, first of all, time, you have to have confidence that the best way to drive organizations in the economy going forward is to allow entrepreneurs to drive the business forward. I'm very aware of the challenges and disappointments that people tend to have. I'm going to give you back the Hungary example. When I joined Tungsram in 1996, you can tell from many of the older executives that there was a revisionist thinking of the past. Guaranteed pensions, guaranteed housing, and it is really up to the business community to demonstrate what is possible on one hand, and it is going to take examples of people coming out of universities to be able to have the type of job opportunities that's going to enable the quality of life to become self-evident. And it does take 10, 15, even 20 years of real determined efforts to be able to demonstrate what the market economies can deliver. And I do understand Western Europe and U.S. have to be better role models than what we have been in the last 5 or 10 years. And I'm cautiously optimistic. Some of the crisis right now is going to reinforce the type of policies that are required to be able to create the growth and the opportunities for employees and for the upcoming graduates. I'm not sure if I covered everything. Did I forget anything significant?
The one that we didn't cover was your how did you get back to the region, and what's the...
I mean, it was a guilt feeling. And this is I always try to know you good husband, to be a good father, to be a good business leader, to be a role model. I mean, it was always important to me. I always said I was that very proud Yugoslav, very proud Macedonian, and there was the moment of there's a president of the country calling to congratulate you. You're not sure what his name is, so there was a view that and I do want to give back. I'm very proud of everything I've always have participated in. So the invitation was wide open. I did go back to Macedonia within 2 months. President Trajkovski brought the whole cabinet, so we're very proud of you. We have significant ambitions for Macedonia. This is what we're doing. Can you put a good word for us to President Bush or in the United States? And we try to drive e-commerce within Macedonia. We helped actually USAID and Motorola made Macedonia the first completely WiMAX country through the region. And frankly, it was appreciation to see students, to see business people, to appreciate what you're doing. Gave more of the resolve to try to give back. And I don't want to give an impression that 7, 8 of us are making a huge difference. I mean, it's a long process, but if there's open doors on one hand, and if you can contribute back, it's a shame that you cannot do that. And going back to the CEOs here, I mean, the CEO position, in my perspective, is among the most revered in the world. Should be the most revered. And the way you're driving your company, also you adding to society by being a good role model. And that really is a challenge, this new deal for new age. That is the opportunity the executives here have as well.
Maju smo izostavili iz ovog prethodnog kruga. Maju, izvoli. Take this question very seriously, please. This is the most important one.
Ne, ovo neće biti pitanje. Ovo je samo jedno veliko hvala Majku što je došao ovde, što je ovim svojim dolaskom između ostalog pokazao šta znači pravo liderstvo i šta znači biti pravi role model o kome govorimo. Mike je naime na ovu poziciju novu u Blackstone Investment Fundu promovisan, koliko znam, ovog ponedeljka. I u mailu koji nam je poslao tokom vikenda je rekao vi možete da shvatite da ovo nije baš zgodno vreme meni da putujem, ali ja moram da držim i želim da držim svoje obećanje. I sad kad pokušavam da gledam i slušam Majka i da u isto vreme razmišljam šta je to što je ovom čoveku pomoglo da ga učini toliko uspešnim i da ima jednu takvu karijeru, prosto pored očigledne kompetentnosti koja mora da bude deo te priče, nameće se snažno jedan utisak jednog divnog karaktera. I jako je važno da i svi mi ovde nekako držimo to na umu, da je deo svake liderske priče jedna dobra dinamika stručnosti i karaktera. Ja ne znam, nisam ovde sa drugima to podelila, ali recimo moja komunikacija sa Majkom koja je krenula preko Zorice iz ambasade, ja sam prvo pomislila kad smo došli na ideju da ga poznam, ja sam mislila jao kako ću se ja sad probiti do tako uspešnog čoveka i koliko će sad tu biti linija asistenata i odbrana i živih zidova i tako dalje. I Zorica mi je dala jedan mail i ja sam videla tu piše mike@al.com i dobro, ja sam sad napisala taj mail i mislila sam opet će sad sve to da se desi. Mike mi je odgovorio sa hi Maja u roku od 2 dana. Ja moram da kažem da mi to iskustvo nismo imali sa mnogima od vas. Pisali smo pa nismo mogli da dobijemo... Za mnoge od vas nismo dobili ni lične adrese, nego su neki ofisi, neke tako ovako, neke visoke i čudni nazivi i onda nam se dešavalo da šaljemo recimo jedan poziv, pa drugi poziv, pa treći poziv. Tek kad se nađemo na nekom koktelu neko večer, negde ja kažem pa dobiste li poziv Kole recimo? Kaže, koji poziv? Znači, nismo mogli da se probijemo. Ovo je primer. Mislim da između ostalog, pored svega onoga što smo čuli, zato sam i rekla, životna priča je već priča o leadershipu. Ne trebaju nam toliko sama uputstva, nego da vidimo čoveka koji je na ovaj način ovako ispričao svoj život do ovog trenutka i sigurno sam da će nastaviti dalje. I još samo želim da kažem, vi ste nam rekli, ponudili u jednom trenutku da računamo na dijasporu. Ja mislim da mi nedovoljno koristimo potencijale i eventualni entuzijazam dijaspore, ali pošto ste vi to ponudili, na vas lično ćemo da računamo i budite sigurni da ćemo se javiti. Hvala Mike, puno u ime svih nas.
Dodatak ovome, verovatno da nam je vreme isteklo, tako?